Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Francis and Friends. And so glad to have you. Today we have a great program. I'm only going to be able to be in the first hour because when we take our top of the hour break, Dad and Gabe and I, we're going to hop in a car and we're driving to Memphis to be at the birthday party of Dad's cousin, my cousin, Jerry Lee Lewis. And one of the founders of rock and roll, one of the first inductees in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Mickey Gilley, our other cousin that's in country music, will be there, and be the first time that Dad, Mickey, and Jerry Lee have been together in quite a while, many years. So we're looking forward to that. I want to jump right into the program today. You know the panelists, we have them here, and but we have a very special guest today, Roger Stone. And Roger is a conservative political consultant who has served as a senior campaign aide to 3 presidents, has been a part of 10 national presidential campaigns, and he travels frequently around the country speaking to various political organizations. However, most recently, Mr. Stone has been sharing his testimony at churches around the country. He is also the author of a New York Times bestselling book entitled The Myth of Russian Collusion, and he's joining us today from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Well, Mr. Stone, how are you today?
Good morning. I'm a little jealous.
Why is that?
I'd like to go to Jerry Lee Lewis's birthday. The killer rocks on.
Yeah, he does. He does. Well, I want to tell you, I'm excited. I'm excited to have you here today. But I want to set something up for the audience, and Mother will be right here right shortly. But if I understand correct, you got your start in New York City working for Roy Cohn. Am I correct in that?
No, not really.
Okay.
I got my start working for Barry Goldwater.
Okay.
As a volunteer in the 1964 campaign, I became infected with not only the political bug, but the conservative bug. In fact, I always said I was conservative first, an American first, a Christian, I think it's right, a Christian first, an American second, a conservative third, and a Republican fourth. But when I was sent to New York in 1980 to organize Governor Ronald Reagan's campaign for president, somebody introduced me to Roy Cohn. Cohn had been a friend of Ronald and Nancy Reagan's going back to the Screen Actors Guild days when communists tried to take over the Guild in the late 30s and 40s. And it was Roy Cohn, in turn, who introduced me to Donald Trump.
Oh, okay.
We became friends and are friends now going on 40 years.
You know, I saw Mr. Stone. I saw you the other day, and it was an interview that you had given a few months earlier, and you started sharing your testimony. And I really could sense the presence of the Lord and the encounter that you had with Jesus Christ. And we'll get to that in just a moment. But I want to go back to what has brought you to in the news in the last couple of years. So would you just give us kind of a rundown of how your life was turned upside down by the Justice Department and your prosecution for, to this day, I'm not sure I even know what you were prosecuted for. It was so convoluted. And give us a rundown of that.
Sure. I think it's important for context to understand that I have been a friend of the president's for 40 years. In 1988, I urged him to run for president the first time. He thought I was out of my mind. He had real estate mountains yet to climb, but I recognized in him certain qualities, strength, and I really believed he could be not only a great presidential candidate, but a great president. Fast forward to 2000, I tried to persuade him to run again. He considered it briefly, but the time was not. Fast forward to 2012, Barack Obama's reelection. Once again tried to persuade Donald Trump he could beat Obama and be a great president. He was sort of affected, but at the last minute, he came to the conclusion that it was late and Governor Romney picked up the nomination. And then 2016 comes that momentous time in which I believe the Lord, Donald Trump, right place at the right time, use him for his purposes. Those purposes to save this nation and perhaps even Western civilization. So I'm a known friend of Trump's. I didn't work on his campaign other than very early in terms of trying to set it up. 1 year, Trump administration, Robert Mueller, the special counsel who was appointed essentially to move President Trump, targeted in the most horrific ordeal you can possibly imagine. For 3 years, 8 stories, mainstream media. Roger Stone was indicted for treason. Roger Stone was indicted for espionage, conspiracy against the United States, money laundering, millions of dollars of rubles in violation of the foreign campaign contributions, wire fraud, mail fraud, unauthorized access to a computer, receipt of stolen material and its dissemination. They misrepresented the fact that there was evidence of any of those crimes to multiple judges. They did extraordinary, deep investigation. I like to call it a legal, logical examination. And they found no evidence whatsoever of any of those crimes. So then they essentially manufactured lying Congress change. Lying to Congress. Comey, Clapper, Brennan, Hillary, Orr, Rosenstein, Mueller. This list goes on and on. So it was an extraordinary situation, which I actually believe that I would receive a fair trial. And then when I went to Washington, D.C., I found a hostile judge who essentially limited every powerful line of defense, a 100% hostile jury, no Republicans, no military veterans, no evangelical Christians, no independents. It could have been the Obama-Clinton alumni union, as a matter of fact. And to make the whole thing worse, they put a gag on me in violation of the Constitution. So for 16 months, CNN, MSNBC, and the New York Times could write anything they want about me, true or not. But I was not allowed to defend myself in any forum.
That is horrible.
I lost my home. I lost my savings. I lost most of my insurance. I lost my ability to make a living, because I make a living by speaking and writing, and I was limited in my travel. It essentially bankrupted my family. And it was very clear I was being railroaded in a Soviet-style show trial, and there was nothing I could do about it until I turned my life over to God.
Well, I want to get to your testimony because it's in a moment, because it's absolutely fantastic. But how is it possible that I know the answer, but I want this is for our audience that are watching right now. I mean, how can our judicial system hamstrung someone where they can say whatever they want to say, and yet you can't say anything at all in your defense? I mean, didn't somebody raise a red flag and say something is not right here and maybe we shouldn't be doing this? Or was this a pure political hatchet job from beginning to end?
Well, you may remember on January 25th, 2019, 29 heavily armed FBI agents arrived at my home in Fort Lauderdale.
Right.
Complete SWAT gear, night goggles, assault weapons. They arrived in 29 armored vehicles. There was a government helicopter overhead. There were 2 government boats that pulled up to the dock behind my home. Cost the taxpayers $1.1 million. For the first time, nonviolent, white-collar crime of allegedly lying to Congress. This was a show designed to vilify me, and as you may know, CNN, I don't know, it was coincidental. They just happened to be there 15 minutes before the takedown.
Yeah, right. They just happened to be there. Like wink, wink. We understand all of that. But I think that any fair American, Mr. Stone, would recognize that you were to the other side. You were a conduit to get to Donald Trump and to try to gin up all of this Russia collusion junk, which was made up whole lie. Steele was a farce. The dossier was a farce. This was a political hit job from beginning to end. And I'm personally convinced that Comey knew it, understood it for that, but they still manufactured a lie, all to bring down our president. And after millions of dollars being spent on investigation, we get the Mueller report, which is a piece of garbage. Yeah. There's nothing there. So do you share my sentiment that they were just trying to take down, if they could take you down, that could also create the mindset of people that there must be something to the Russian collusion with Trump? Am I correct in that?
Yes, I think that's a very good analysis, with the exception that after they had to be at the weakest possible position, to answer your other question, yes, my lawyers objected to everything that was done. Overruled. With venom in the judge's eyes. Overruled. No, she ruled against my legal team on every legal motion, pre-trial and during the trial, with one exception. She's the government's prosecutor. She's not the people's prosecutor.
Right, that's correct, yeah.
But on July 14th, 2019, the reason for all of this became clear. One of the prosecutors called one of my lawyers, asked him to fly to Washington, and he said, we have this list of 29 phone calls between candidate Trump and your client Roger Stone in 2016. It's time for your client to cooperate. It's time for him to admit that these phone calls were about coordinating with the Russians and WikiLeaks. In other words, they wanted me to bear false witness. See, the Democrats run around today and say, Stone was covering up for Trump. No, they wanted me to lie in violation of the Ten Commandments. They were going to use this lie as an article of impeachment against the president. And they said, if I decided not to cooperate, that they would issue superseding charges against me to make sure that I died in a federal prison. And I refused.
Well, I saw the day that the press conference you had that you were refusing to do all of that, and they were the commentator was talking about you could be put in prison at any moment now, and they're coming. How did it work out though that you didn't get sent to prison?
Well, I would admit to you that I went through an extraordinarily difficult time with this.
I believe that.
You've lost everything. I had the strong support of my wife and my family. I explained to them, honey, if I decide to plead not guilty, there's a 99.9% chance that I will be convicted in the District of Columbia. But I could not lie and look myself in the mirror. I couldn't, bear witness against a friend of mine of 40 years who I happen to think is doing an extraordinarily good job as president, something I had dreamed about since 1988. I mean, I had worked for Senator Bob Dole. I had worked for President Richard Nixon. I had worked for President Ronald Reagan. But Donald Trump is tougher than all of them put together. He's a very stubborn man. I mean that in a positive sense. When he decides to do something for his country, he will do it, and nothing will get in his way. In any event, I was dispirited. I was depressed. I was drinking a little too much. I realized what was coming, that I was going to be held up in some Soviet-style show trial. The death threats against me and my family would increase every week. And I had been told by a number of my friends that I really needed to take this problem and turn it over to Jesus. Take this problem and reaffirm my faith in Jesus Christ, be reborn, and that if I did that, God would protect me. God would defend me. God would not abandon me. And unfortunately, for a while, I took this evidence kind of casually. My own parish priest here in Fort Lauderdale gave me this advice. Father Michael Grady, some terrific African-American pastors that I had befriended in 2016 in the presidential campaign, Reverend Darrell Scott, Reverend Mark Burns, and others. I began reading the Psalms. I began reading the Proverbs, but I'm going to be honest, I wasn't feeling it. I just wasn't feeling it. Then a very young evangelist named Randy Coggins, 26 years old, very dynamic, an extraordinary orator, a real apostle for Jesus Christ. And I had met at a Republican book signing, and he had kept in touch. And he had been relentless in urging me to embrace the Lord and to invite him into my life. And then finally he said, Reverend Franklin Graham is going to be in Boca Raton, and in your part of the woods, they have a free revival. Would you like to go with me? I said, I would. He said, would you like to meet Reverend Graham? Well, I had seen Billy Graham preach when I was 12 years old in a tent revival in Bridgeport, Connecticut. It's one of the most memorable things about my childhood.
It's amazing.
He was one of the greatest men of the 20th century. He really moved me that day, and I was only 12 years old. So I jumped at the chance to meet with Franklin Graham, who was very gracious. I had met Reverend Graham's daughter, Sissy, previously. He gave me about 20 minutes on his tour bus. I poured out my heart to him because I know he's a friend of the president's. I was looking at the possibility of clemency, of some act, some humanitarian act by the president. But Reverend Graham was very forceful. And he said, look, I'll do what I can, but you have the power to solve this problem by turning your life over to God, by being reborn, by confessing your sin, by pledging to walk in his way. He said, I know other men who've gone to prison and who faced the anguish that you're facing, and God gave them comfort, and God saw them through it. I can't give you any better advice than for you to make a clean breast of it and embrace the Lord. I thought about that. Then we went to his revival, which was amazing. 2,000 Christians in the open field for a public amphitheater. Folks brought their own, folding chairs and white. And then that moment came in Reverend Graham's oration. And by the way, he's not his father, but he's very, very good. He just has a style of his own.
Right, that's correct.
Very effective speaker. And he came to the part in his remarks where he said, I don't care what your problem is, whether it's alcoholism or drug abuse or family problems or relationship problems or health problems or financial problems. God will protect you. God will see you through it. God will guide you. And he said, and I guarantee it, if you will make a sincere effort to embrace Jesus Christ and bring him into your life. We then went to the field, and when I heard this, I stood with 400 other Christians, and I was reborn.
Wow.
And it was as if a cement block had been lifted from my chest. I went to this event depressed, with anxiety, with fear. My wife is 73 years old. She has rheumatoid arthritis. I had no idea who would care for her if I was unfairly and unjustly incarcerated. But from that moment that I left that field with Reverend Graham, I knew everything would be okay.
Wow.
I knew that the president would have the wisdom to do the right thing. And therefore, I approached the future with confidence. I had a strange calm. When I got home, my wife said, "What happened?" And I explained it to her. And the next day, or the day after that, actually, I think, I got a special delivery Bible, a Billy Graham Bible that had been sent to me by Reverend Graham, and he had gone through and annotated with a highlighter certain sections.
Right.
And there was a note that said, on those days in which you were depressed, on those days that you were scared or worried, read these passages and they will bring you straight. And they did. So it is kind of a double-barreled story here at the end. Not only was I convicted, but unlike every other individual convicted of a nonviolent crime, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals insisted that I be sent to a COVID-19 infested prison immediately. In other words, Michael Cohen and Michael Avenatti and Rick Gates and Paul Manafort and all of these others have been released to home confinement. That's the policy of the Department of Justice and the policy of the Department of Prisons, or Bureau of Prisons. I've got to be honest with you. I'm 67 years old with a lifetime history of asthma. This was a death sentence. The president, in his wisdom, in an act of both justice and mercy, in a humanitarian act, in the name of God, commuted my sentence. That's why I'm able to be with you today.
You know, Roger, when I heard that they were going to remand you, I thought, and I knew that Manafort and all these others had been given early release back to their homes because of the COVID-19. And my first reaction was, they're trying to kill this man. They're trying to kill this man. There's no other way that you can look at it. But like I said, when I saw your testimony, I saw a man that had been changed, because I knew who you were. I'd followed you and seen you on other interviews and different things, and I knew a little bit of the background. And I even told my mother and dad, I said, this man accepted the Lord. This man has had a true heart encounter with Jesus Christ. And you know, before we have to take our first break, you know, we do our best here to present truth to the people. You've known Donald Trump for 40 years, and, you know, he's not a politician. He's a businessman. He doesn't play the political game. And a lot of people, you know, especially Christians, they say, well, we don't think he's presidential, which I don't even know what that means, because to me, presidential is getting the job done that you were elected to do. But can you give us kind of a glimpse into his personality and what kind of man that he is?
Well, I think these things have to be looked at historically. You know, they said Andrew Jackson wasn't very political.
Right.
Theodore Roosevelt, this guy's an egomaniac. He's not very presidential. Now we look back at it and we view that he was one of our greatest presidents ever, as was Andrew Jackson, for example. Trump doesn't have a Washington-style operating system, which is why the permanent political establishment dislikes him too much. Here's why. He's his own man. He decides what he's going to say. He decides what he's going to do. He decides where he's going to go. He decides what policies he's going to pursue. He's not handled. He's not managed. He isn't scripted. It's genuine. He speaks from the heart. And I believe very firmly that God gave him the guidance to provide clemency in my case, just as God gives him guidance every single day in what is the most difficult job probably on the face of the earth. And he is a man of deep faith. I think, like me, he was not always a man of deep faith, But he has been redeemed. There's no doubt about this in my mind. And he feels that divine guidance. I think it provides that confidence and that bounce in his step. He's a man of enormous courage because he is subjected to a tsunami of hate and vituperation by the media every day.
Absolutely.
He lets it roll off his back. He doesn't let it slow him down. He is the right man at the right time to save this nation from hurtling over the cliff to atheistic, godless globalism.
Right.
Thank God for Donald Trump.
Roger, we got to take a break. I want to remind everyone that Roger is the author of the new book, The Myth of Russian Collusion. I want to encourage you to get the book. You can order it from Amazon or Barnes & Nobles, I'm sure, and it will be excellent reading. We'll be right back in just a moment.
Email your questions and comments about today's program to onair@jsm.org. Join Francis and Friends on Facebook, facebook.com/Francis Swaggart.
Oh, and Roger Stone, how wonderful it is to have you with us on the program today. Okay, I'm sorry. We're having some problems here in the studio. And thank you for sharing your testimony with us. You know, I heard it the first time I was looking up something on the telephone and saw you, and you were doing an interview. And I caught it just exactly when you were talking about how that you gave your heart to the Lord Jesus Christ. You realized that you were facing some tough days, and you decided, you know, I need the Lord to help me through this. It was very, very good. I could sense the presence of the Lord, and I told my son Donnie and others, I said, I heard him sharing his testimony, and I could sense the sincerity. I could sense the Lord in what you were saying, and just how wonderful it is that in the midst of all that you have been through, that you're now sharing your testimony of the Lord Jesus Christ with all of our people, and we're thrilled to have you here today. I want to ask a question. My son had asked you right by the program, right at the beginning of the program concerning Donald Trump. And you've been with him, I think, 40 years. And this man, of course, we appreciate everything he has done for the United States of America. And we think that he's had to take an awful lot of flack. And I don't personally know how the man can stand it. And Donnie had asked you to help us understand Donald Trump a little more, your relationship with him. You know, he seems like a man, personally, that I would want to have as my friend. And I don't understand why he's treated like I say I don't understand, but I do understand why he's treated like he is by the left. But could you just share some personal things about this man to enlighten our audience? And by the way, they're listening all over the world today concerning Donald Trump, the man. I appreciate this man an awful lot. So could you share some personal things?
Sure, I'm happy to. Let me tell you a very brief story, but I think it's worth the time. I was working for Donald Trump as a lobbyist in Washington, D.C. I was specifically handling certain currency transaction issues in the Treasury Department. I needed to review these proposed regulations, and I called him from Washington to New York, and I said, I really need to see you this afternoon to go over this material. And he said, no, it's not possible. I have to fly to Atlantic City with my top executives, so I won't be available. And I said, this really must be done today. And he said, all right, if you go right to the airport and jump on a shuttle, you can be here in an hour and 15 minutes. I will wait for you. I'll send the helicopter down to Atlantic City and then have it come back to get me. So that was our plan. I headed for the airport. I landed at what was then LaGuardia Airport. I took a taxi cab to his office. We were 10 minutes into the meeting when his assistant, longtime assistant, Norma Federer, good friend of mine, came in. She was entirely ashen. She said, "Mr. Trump, I have terrible news. The helicopter we chartered crashed in the Pinelands and everyone was killed."
I read about that in your book, and I heard about it over the news, and you should have been on that plane.
He should have been on that plane. And
I mean,
when
helicopter, yeah.
Helicopter, yes. And the point, of course, is that his first act was to say to his assistant, "Please bring me the phone numbers of all the widows." And he sat there, and I watched him do what I could not do. Call each one of these women, console them, talk to them about how much he loved their husbands. It was something that I could not have done because in many cases, he was the first person to tell them that their spouse was dead. So when I read these stories in the fake news media that Donald Trump refuses to call the families of fallen soldiers, I know it's a lie. I know it's a lie. But the most important thing about this story is I didn't save his life. This meeting didn't save his life. God saved his life. God acted through me, perhaps, to save his life because he had some larger purpose in mind for Donald Trump. And today we see what that purpose is.
Yes. You know, Roger, I don't believe I've ever, well, I know I haven't seen anyone treated like you've been treated by the United States and by the news media. And my question to you is why, and I think I know the answer, but I'd like to hear it from you. Why do you think that they would come in and raid your house at night, get you and your wife out of the bed and march you outside, which I thought was a great injustice to you and your wife? Were you really expecting anything like that? Or was this something that you were not expecting?
Well, I expected to be arrested on some fabricated charge. I knew there was no Russian collusion. I knew that I'd had no collaboration with WikiLeaks. I knew that no evidence of that could possibly be found, so it didn't exist. I was scratching my head trying to figure out what crime they could possibly charge me with. In the end, I was charged with the crime of being a friend of Donald Trump. And I was charged so they could later pressure me to bear false witness against the president regarding our phone call so they could impeach him. But I keep reading that liberal Democrats say Stone got special treatment. Really? Where? The raid on my home? That's pretty special. Trying me for lying to Congress when Comey, Clapper, Brennan, Hillary, these people lied to Congress about material matters, significant matters, yet they go uncharged. Another example of the special treatment they gave me. Then, of course, there was the decision to send me to prison despite the COVID-19 pandemic, despite current federal policy, despite the law, despite regulation, despite the facts of my health and age. No, they wanted to silence me pretty quick. So I believe I was targeted to get at the president. I refused to play the game. If they thought I was Michael Cohen, they had the wrong guy. I just wasn't doing that. And I passed 3 polygraph tests, by the way, on the narrow question of whether I ever spoke to the president about WikiLeaks.
Wow.
So, I mean, Michael Cohen was on TV last night saying yet again that he overheard a conversation for which he has no corroboration. He's changed his story 3 times, says it was in June, then says it was, says it was in July, then says it was in August. You know, if you tell the truth, you don't have to think about, keeping your lies straight.
Um, that. Did you all see that on TV when that happened? I don't know whether you guys saw it or not. Well, it was quite something else to see. And let's go back to Donald Trump and him winning the White House. How did he do it with everything that he's got against him? And as we've all learned now, you know, all kind of things were happening behind the scenes to try to ensure that he did not get elected to the highest office in the land. So how did he win that election?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to recognize that Donald Trump didn't have to be president. In other words, he didn't need it for a reaffirmation of his self-worth. Right. He didn't need it to boost his name ID or to be important or to have a nice plane or a beautiful home. He had all those things. In fact, he had one of the greatest lifestyles of all time. He could play golf whenever he wanted to. He could play with his grandchildren whenever he wanted to. He made his own schedule. And he never, from an ego point of view, needed to be president. We have had presidents who needed the reaffirmation of the office to be someone. George H.W. Bush comes to mind. Donald Trump didn't get elected to be something. He got elected to do something. And it's one of the reasons why I think he was reluctant in the earlier years when I suggested it, because he didn't believe the time was right. Perhaps he just hadn't heard the calling. But he's very hard to describe. He's a regular guy.
Yeah.
Has a wicked sense of humor. He's fun to be with. He loves a good cheeseburger. You know, he loves to talk about sports. There's nothing stilted or phony or pompous about him. He's when you meet him, he's immediately likable. You know, he's been kidding me about my granddaughter, who he met when she was about 11 years old. He met her once, and every time I see him, he asks me how she's doing. So he's not a politician, but he is a political leader, and he has that elusive quality that John F. Kennedy had, that President Ronald Reagan had, and that Donald Trump has. He's charismatic. He's magnetic. It's that same quality I saw in Reverend Billy Graham when I was 12 years old. It's hard to put your finger on it, but it's a presence, and it's an ability to motivate others.
You know, I sense that he loves this country of America. You know, this is not just for him to have another notch in his belt of some accomplishment, which he has accomplished a lot. But I sense he sincerely loves the American people and loves the United States of America, and he does not want to see us slide into socialism or communism, which we're right on the verge of doing. We're all praying for him for this next election coming up. You know, I sense sincerity in him about those things.
I think that's a very shrewd analysis. If you go back to an interview he gave with Oprah Winfrey, may have been almost 15 or 20 years ago, and she says to him, "Oh, what about you, Donald? Would you ever run for public office? Would you ever run for president?" And he says, "No, I don't think so, unless things get so bad that I have no choice." That's exactly what happened in 2016. He was tired of seeing America defeated. He was tired of American interests being sold out abroad by our government. He was tired of seeing the two-party duopoly that has run the country in the ground while lining their pockets. He was tired of the whole inside the Beltway camaraderie of both parties, who put on a great show for the TV commercials and the TV. But as soon as it's over, they all go to dinner and slap each other on the back and talk about how they put one over on the taxpayers once again. So he got tired of the groupthink of Washington. He got tired of the fact that we were mired in endless war and rule 4, foreign wars, that our civil rights were being eroded, that our economy was a disaster, that we had the most anemic economic recovery under Obama than American history, that we were deeper in debt, that our NATO allies were playing us for a sucker, refusing to pay their fair share for their defense while we were ponying up the full amount every year. He finally decided somebody has to do something about this. And that somebody was him.
Oh, well, listen, what would you what would you do? Well, I shouldn't say what would you do. What would you say, Roger, to someone like Donald Trump, the average person? We want him to know we're behind him, and we are trying to, I guess, out of sympathy on my part, and it's not really sympathy. I see injustice in the way that he's treated. That's a better word. Injustice in the way that he's treated. And do you think, does he ever get discouraged? I mean, this has to get to him.
I have never seen him dispirited. I will admit to you that I've seen him angry, but it passes in a flash like a rainstorm. He, like Reagan, he has a genial, very balanced personality. And like Reagan, he's a big picture man. Let somebody else take care of the little details, but here's the overall policy, whether it be sealing our borders or whether it be canceling the Iran deal when he found out that we were secretly sending the pallets of hundreds of millions of dollars that weren't part of the deal. It wasn't in the deal anywhere. These were bribes for Iranian politicians. He put a stop to that. So he's a man of enormous conviction. He has enormous physical stamina. I mean, he literally survives on 4 or 5 hours sleep a night. When I worked for him, it was not uncommon for him to call you at 3 o'clock in the morning. First thing he would say is, "Hey, what are you doing?"
Yeah, you know, he's...
Sleeping?
Okay, you know, he's getting ready for his first debate tonight with Joe Biden, and we all know. Let me ask the guys something here first. Did any of you have a question? Okay, before I ask my question, Roger, I'm going to let Carl Brown. Forgive me, Carl. Carl Brown. He has a question, and then some of the other panels may have a question for you before we go any further.
Good morning, Brother Roger Stone. This is Brother Carl Brown. I'd like to ask, well, let me first comment on something you said. I've never heard it quite put like that before. There's been many things said of the president, but not quite the way you put it, and I just want to commend you for the statement. You said that he didn't become president to be something, but to do something. I think that's very, awesome. Very profound.
Yes, yes.
I'd like to ask this question. You know Washington, you know the president, you know the Democratic Party and what they believe, and I'd just like to ask, because I think that most of America have a preconceived understanding or idea of why they are coming against the president like they are. And I'd like to ask you for your personal opinion. Why do you think they're coming so hard against this president? It's even before he was elected. When he came down the escalator with his wife, the assault begun at that moment. What was it about him that intimidated or scares, rather, this democratic and liberal mindset that's obviously trying to dominate America? What, in your opinion, why did he come against him like that?
Because he cannot be bought and he cannot be bossed. He answers to no one but the American people. He got elected president without the help of any of the usual players. He doesn't owe the banking industry or the oil and gas industry or Wall Street. He doesn't owe anybody but the American people. And he disagrees with their neocon, one government, anti-Christian philosophy for America's future. He stands away he stands against their agenda. In all honesty, they view this as their birthright. These elites thought this election was wired. It will be Hillary Clinton versus Jeb Bush.
Yeah.
Their policies are identical. They make them sound different at election time, but their policies are identical. And then out of nowhere comes this most improbable New York billionaire whose performance on the stump is interesting. It's mesmerizing. It's exciting. They never saw him coming. First, they tried to deride him as some kind of caricature. Then, by the time they realized he was rolling up votes, it was too late. So they despise him because he wants to bring our troops home from abroad. The Pentagon wants to keep them there indefinitely, maybe even send a few more. He wants to redo their big omnibus one-size-fits-all trade deal that has destroyed the job market in this country. He wants to build a wall to secure our southern borders. These are all politically incorrect positions. They just happen to be the positions supported by the American people. So he scares the daylights out of him because he cannot be controlled. He cannot be told what to do. He marches to his own drummer. He is following an agenda that the American people clearly want. So they want to remove him to get back to business as usual.
Yes.
Let me ask, I'm going to switch the subject right now. Did you have more, Carl, that you wanted to add to
just
that?
one more statement.
Sure,
Sister
please
Swaggart,
do.
is
Go
this.
ahead.
If they did not want a president that could not be controlled, then that is a good understanding of why they're pushing for Joe Biden so hard to be the president, because as I see it, and I'm sure as most Americans see it, and he's been called the Trojan horse, there's some truth to that, isn't it?
Carl, I think that's a very good analysis. I mean, Joe Biden happened to be the right guy standing in the right place at the right time when the Democratic Party became desperate to block Bernie Sanders. They knew the nomination of Senator Sanders would be another George McGovern, that Americans will not accept socialism when it's presented to them as socialism. They understood Joe Biden offers them socialism in a much slower and more covert way, but it's still the same old baloney. I think it's clear to the American people that Joe Biden, who went into government service at age 29 and has only been out of the vice presidency for 4 years, yet he's a multi-millionaire. I'd like to understand that right off the bat. How did that happen? But I think people understand that he doesn't have the stamina, the fortitude, the strength to not only be president, but he is surrounding himself essentially with the same left-wing coterie of Hillary people that would have run the country had she been elected.
Yeah. Do you think he'll get rid of all those people if he gets reelected again?
He being the president?
Yes. I mean, the people that are around him, he can't trust. You know, FBI, the CIA, and you can't trust them. And so the fact that they are around the president all the time here and know what all of these things, do you think there's a possibility in his next term that he might try to change all that?
Well, from your mouth to God's ear, as they say. Look, I think that this is understandable from the point of view that Donald Trump, and this was said earlier on he's not a politician. He's not a Washington creature. Richard Nixon had 8 years as vice president to see exactly how the government worked. Lyndon Johnson had 3 years as vice president to see how the government worked. He knew what the 10 most important jobs in the country were. When Donald Trump became president, first of all, he had the reasonable expectation that America would do what it's done after every presidential election and come together. I didn't like Barack Obama, but I wasn't calling for his ouster. I figured we would beat him in the next election.
Yeah.
I didn't like Bill Clinton, and I thought the Republican attempt to impeach him over personal indiscretions was a mistake. I think there were other issues for which he could have been impeached. So the president felt that there would be a honeymoon. There was none. He was told that these many people in government were professionals who had served Republicans and Democrats, and they would loyally serve him. That was an error. He clearly has learned his lesson. So I think there's a high probability, if elected, that he cleans house.
I hope
And
he
first,
does.
the first one who needs to go is FBI Director Christopher Wray,
Right.
a man who's been working against the president from the second he was nominated.
Yeah, you know, I've never seen anything like it before in the history of this nation. I've not read about it. This man, I just hope he's able to do that, to clean house. And we've got to take a quick break, Roger, and we're going to be right back after the break and ask all of you to stay tuned. At this time, I will be opening the telephones. I know that many of you have questions that you would like to ask this man. And I want you to feel free to do that. And that number is 800-342-8430. Now, remember, you may disagree with some of the things that you've heard today. You may have questions concerning your disagreement, or you may agree totally with everything. Either way, we would like to hear from you. Feel free to give us a call, and we'll be right back after this break.
Truth. Sometimes it's hard to find. That's why there's Francis and Friends. Previous Francis and Friends programs are available online at sunlifetv.com.
Okay, we're back. And I have Andrew from Ohio on the phone. And Andrew, you have a question for Roger Stone?
Yeah, I had a question for Roger Stone. Thanks for having me on, Francis.
Sure.
Yeah, in 2005, Trump paid $38 million in federal income tax. Isn't that amazing how the media manipulates that? They pick and choose which year they want to show Trump's tax returns. And why don't they report that Trump does not take a presidential paycheck, the $400,000? It's just amazing the attacks on this man, Trump and Roger Stone and everybody, when Americans voluntarily donate about 7 times more than Europeans, yet we're still hated by the left. It's just amazing. I just wanted to hear his opinion on that.
Thank you for your call. First of all, the entire Donald Trump tax matter, of course, is a recycle. We heard all of this before. And they tried to intimate that the president's done something wrong, that he has avoided taxes illegally, which is not the case. He has followed the tax code as it is written. There are provisions in the tax code when a business person, man or woman, sustains very substantial losses. You have to document those losses. So he paid his fair share of taxes every year that he's been a U.S. citizen. If you want to change the tax code to close some of these loopholes, you could do that. But I don't want a president who overpays his taxes. That's not the man I want watching my federal tax dollars. I want the man who paid the minimum required by law. That's not stupid. That's smart.
Yes, yes, it is.
Well, what they're also missing, the fact that he pays so much in because he's real estate. He does a lot of real estate in taxes every time he does a transaction. So it's not as if he's not helping local government. He certainly is. And as for the federal things, at one point he was asked, he said, well, you paid very little. He said, that's because I'm smart.
Right.
And he wasn't being smart aleck about it. He was just saying, look, I'm a smart businessman.
Yeah, what he's doing
also
is what
recognize-
every businessman does. Yeah, it's Roger.
Well, but let's also recognize that until recently, he was paying New York State income tax.
Wow.
The most confiscatory, outrageous tax rate in the country. I believe it's number one. I can tell you this, having lived there, you sure don't get much in services in return for your tax bill. So he was paying the highest state taxes in the nation, and he's done nothing wrong. This is just another New York Times smear attempt.
Yeah.
Go.
I'm sorry. We still have a
go
person
ahead.
on the line. I was going to ask him a question about their a question about the 80 million mailed-in ballots that are being used. It just seems to me that from the very beginning that this election is being rigged. And the mail-in ballots is another way. What do you suggest be done about that?
Well, your analysis is spot on. Mail-in ballots, which is different than absentee ballots. There's some confusion. Mail-in ballots are when the Board of Elections in, say, Clark County, Nevada, or now the entire state of New Jersey, mails an unsolicited ballot to everybody on the voting rolls, even when those on the voting rolls haven't voted in 6 years and have not responded to multiple postcards to that voter, trying to ascertain whether they still are alive, do they still live in the state, and so on. I was in Nevada 2 weeks ago, and I met a man who told me that he had 4 mail-in ballots. I said, how'd that happen? He said, well, I rent an apartment, so I got 1 ballot in my name, and then I got 3 more ballots in the names of the people who were tenants in my apartment before I was, all of whom have moved out of state.
Yeah.
And I said, well, if you were a dishonest guy, you could vote all 4 of those ballots. And he said, I certainly could, and nothing would happen. No one would know. I said, what did you do with the other 3 ballots? He said, I tore them up.
Well, you know, I saw in the news this morning, or what it was like yesterday, concerning the man from Minnesota.
That's right.
That had boxes of ballots.
Yeah, over 300.
Yeah, hundreds of them, maybe thousands of them. I don't know, but had ballots in there. He was laughing about it. It was, you know, so we all have concern about that. Because we know that this election is going to be as dirty as any election that we have ever had. And for this man to come out and win, it will be because of the help of the Lord Jesus Christ. So I'm praying in that direction.
Is there anything that President Trump can do about those ballots?
Yeah. Roger?
I think the answer is yes. There is relatively simple end-to-end technology in which any state or county electoral board can track every ballot from the moment that it is mailed out or from the moment that a voter arrives and counts it. This technology should have been put in place by the states. It hasn't. Should have been put in place by the party or both parties because it's not partisan. All we want is an honest count.
There we go.
We're just asking for an honest count. So this technology is something I'm looking into very aggressively. I'd like to see if it can be put into place in certain polling places. Now, because the folks at Media Matters for America and other cretins are watching this, let me be very clear. I never said anything here about intimidating voters, harassing voters, or pressuring voters. I'm talking about analyzing the results after the fact to ensure we got an honest count.
Right.
There's been so many cases, I use the word cases, so many cases of mail being lost, being destroyed from areas that they know is geographically a Republican area. And so it just seems to me that this election, and I think Brother Donnie said it on Sunday, may end up in the courts.
I think that is very, very highly likely.
Wow, I sure hope not. Mm-hmm.
Well, but let's recognize mail-in ballots are just one area of potential fraud. You have the voting of illegals. You have the multiple voting of voters, people voting more than once. You have people voting in
Criminals.
the names of other people who are deceased or moved out of the state. You have manipulation of the electronic voting machines from a central server. You can do that with a $30 device you can buy at Best Buy, believe it or not.
Yeah.
So, yes, the Democrats will use every old trick in the book. It is not coincidental that the great Democratic machines of Richard Daley in Chicago and Frank Hague in Jersey City and the boss of St. Louis, these people are adept at vote stealing. They have it down to a science. And therefore, ballot security is going to be very important. And as Francis just said, I'm praying for a just result.
Amen.
I'm living proof that prayer works.
Yes.
I can tell you and sit you right here and tell you it works.
It does.
Therefore, if you want to have the right result on this election, drop down on your knees every
Praise
night
God.
or every morning and pray for it.
Amen.
That's it.
God will provide.
That's exactly right.
In the book of Joel, it talks about telling those who minister and the priests to stand between the porch and the altar and intercede. We need the church to be praying. I really believe what Brother Stone and what you're saying can happen. I think that we can have such a clear victory that the court will not be necessary. But that's not going to happen unless the Christian church prays and seeks God.
Amen. You're 100% Mike. Let me ask Andrew from Ohio. We kind of took the conversation away from you, Andrew. Are you still on the phone?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes. Did you have more that you'd like to say to Roger?
Yeah, I wanted his opinion on two things that the Democrats did this year. First, Chuck Schumer, who's the most powerful Democrat in the Senate. What is his opinion on when he threatened Kavanaugh and Gorsuch, I think his name is, on abortion restrictions, and his opinion on when Nancy Pelosi ripped the speech at the State of the Union address?
Shocking, appalling in both cases, but recognize the two-tier justice system we have in this country. Chuck Schumer threatens the lives of two Supreme Court justices. There's no prosecution of Chuck Schumer, even though that is highly illegal. In my case, I am falsely accused of threatening the judge in my case. I prove that that is not the case, yet going forward at every turn, the prosecutors pull up this chestnut, acting as if I was convicted of the crime of threatening a federal judge, which is not what I did, and there is no such finding. So we have two-tiered justice, and if you're a powerful elite like Chuck Schumer, you can pretty much get away with anything. Nancy Pelosi's stunt hurt her more than it hurt the president. It was beneath the dignity of her office as Speaker of the House. But I'm convinced that she may not all be there. I honestly believe that. Half the time, she doesn't even make sense.
Yeah. Yeah, Roger, you know, and thank you, Andrew. But Roger, I want to ask this question. You have withdrawn your appeal to the Washington, D.C. Circuit. You had appeal to the State of Appeals there, and you withdrew your appeal. Why did you do that?
Here is why, Francis. In the course of 30 days, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals withdrew their order demanding the dismissal of General Flynn's case. They ordered that the president's personal attorney, or his attorney, Don McGahn, must testify for Congress. If you're a lawyer, that's called wrongly decided. They ruled that Hillary Clinton does not have to answer questions about her illegal email server, and they illegally and unconstitutionally ordered me sent to a COVID-19 infested prison in violation of the law, all precedents, and or regulations. So why should I go out and raise $1 million for an appeal to be put in front of a corrupted court where I cannot win? And if I won a new trial on the basis of juror misconduct, my trial would be conducted by Amy Berman Jackson, who has neither the integrity nor the temperament to be a federal judge.
Well,
She's
no.
a hater. And the hate, you can see the hatred for our president and for me in her eyes. Going up again for trial again before her again would have the same exact result.
Yeah.
So I reluctantly decided not to put my family through that, not to kill myself, to raise the money, because no conservative, no Christian, no Republican, no veteran can get a fair trial in the District of Columbia.
Wow.
You know, and we've watched on TV what has happened to General Flynn. He was just, I mean, the Attorney General for the United States of America, Barr, he told him, he let him go. He said, it's time, I'm dismissing all the charges. But then the judge, which is what I don't understand, Roger, how they can do this. The judge refused to do that and is trying to bring up other situations in his life, but he has not let him go yet. So, I mean, can you share with me how that, I mean, what the Attorney General of the United States of America, his statements, and he can be overturned by a judge?
Well, the way this works, of course, is that General Flynn ultimately learned that the government was withholding substantial evidence of his innocence. They knew it was a setup. They knew he never broke the law. They were finally forced to produce that data. On that basis, both the government, the Justice Department, and the defense moved for dismissal. Judge Emmett Sullivan decided, A, to appoint a new special counsel. He has no authority whatsoever to do that under the law. The law he points to that says that he has that authority says the exact opposite. He also has no authority to determine whether Judge Flynn should now be charged with some other crime. Charging people is the specific and distinct responsibility of the executive branch. Thirdly, Judge Sullivan, early in the trial, viciously attacked General Flynn, claiming incorrectly that he worked for the Greek government while working for the U.S. government, therefore he was a traitor. That's completely incorrect. Judge Sullivan owes the general an apology. No apology has been forthcoming. Those three acts show you that this judge should be removed from the case. But his drinking buddies on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals did not agree. It's a travesty. Next year, if there is a Republican Congress, articles of impeachment against Judge Emmett Sullivan should be introduced and passed.
Yeah.
Our Constitution has a provision for corrupt judges and removing them, and it's time to start.
Yeah, but as you well know, I mean, General Flynn is spending a fortune on his defense. Is that fair?
General Flynn is literally one of the greatest men I've ever come across. He is a true American patriot.
He looks like
He's
it.
a genuine war hero. He's a war hero. He has put his life at risk to save his fellow soldiers. He is a man of enormous faith. He's a man of enormous courage. The deep state, the permanent government establishment fears him because he knows everything about their corruption. And he knows about the corruption of their foreign policy, which is why they are seeking to destroy him. He is in my prayers every night. He has a great family. I'm very friendly with one of his brothers. There are very few people in the country who can appreciate the ordeal he's going through. But I can, because I have been there. And the sooner there is justice for General Flynn, the better off we will be. People who want to sign a petition to the president urging a pardon can go to magapetitions.com. It's free. They don't sell your data, but it will be delivered to the president.
I need to ask a question, and I don't know if it was this story. I believe it was, but there was something about Biden being aware of this ahead of time and actually talking about it in an interview. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do. Here's, I think, the most significant point, which is the Democrats are constantly lecturing us about the rule of law. Bill Barr is destroying the rule of law. Where were you when Barack Obama and Joe Biden used the full authority of the United States government and the extraordinary capability of our intelligence agencies to spy on the Republican candidate and the president, to falsify documents for presentation to the FISA court, and to mount not one, but two completely illicit attempts to remove the president? That is the violation of the rule of law. Don't lecture us.
Right.
When Bill Clinton was on the tarmac fixing his wife's illegal email server case with the Attorney General, that's a crime. Don't lecture us about the rule of law. This is an absurdity. So Joe Biden was in the room when the decision to wiretap and target Donald Trump was made. That is sedition. That is treasonous. That is illegal. But Attorney General Barr has already announced that neither Obama nor Biden will be held responsible for their actions.
Yeah.
I went to work in politics for a fellow named Richard Nixon. He didn't get such a pass, and his crimes were minuscule compared to the abuse of
That's
power
exactly right.
we see today.
Do you think that this will be pursued? And, I mean, we're all sitting out here watching what's taking place, wanting to see it pursued and wanting to see those brought to justice who have trampled on the Constitution, on everything. Like that meeting in President Barack Obama's office, all of them are sitting there and discouraged and discussing all of this. So he's very much aware of what was going on, and a part of it. Is there any chance that anything is going to be done for that?
We have a special counsel, John Durham, who's from my native state of Connecticut. He has an excellent reputation for integrity. On the other hand, I'm sorry, I'm very familiar with the material. It doesn't take 3 years.
No.
The prosecutor in my case, Aaron Zielinski, defrauded the court in the Papadopoulos case. I'm not a lawyer. Give me 1 hour with a grand jury and I'll get you an indictment. It's open and shut.
Yeah.
But nothing happens.
And that's what
Francis,
the people see. And that's what we the people see. And people are getting discouraged because of
Well,
that.
the very week that I was convicted, the prosecutor in my case, J.P. Coney, announced that no case would be brought against Andrew McCabe. There have been 2 Inspector General reports to recommend to Attorney General Barr that James Comey be prosecuted for crimes far more serious than those I was charged with. Nothing happens. Do we have a 2-term justice system in which powerful ruling elites are immune from the law? It sure looks that way. Because if anybody takes an objective look at the Clinton Foundation, you will find a simple case of bribery that would put both the Clintons behind bars for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, Jim.
But didn't they, Roger, this is Jim Nations, didn't they over and over in the trial for a president to impeach him say nobody is above the law? Another question, is it not true that Obama appointed this Judge Sullivan that you was referring to? Isn't he an Obama
yes.
appointed?
Yes. So let's take it in 2 parts. I was around in 1974. I cut my teeth working for President Richard Nixon. He was both very great and, like all men, he was very flawed. But when you look back at him, his record is quite enviable, ending the war, opening the door to China, desegregating the schools, saving Israel from annihilation in the 1973 war. Yet, when his problems arose, liberals told us over and over again, no man is above the law. No person is above the law. I say we apply that same standard. Why is Barack Obama above the law? Why is Joe Biden above the law? In your second part, yes, Barack Obama very carefully and aggressively stacked the D.C. Court of Appeals because he knew that all corruption cases would ultimately go there. He also appointed the judge in my case, Amy Berman Jackson. I'm not going to talk about her today. You'll be able to read it in my formal complaint against her at the appropriate venue.
Okay. And you do have a formal complaint against her now?
I am going to file formal complaints against the 4 initial prosecutors in my case, and I'm going to file a complaint against the judge. Now, I don't have much confidence because the system protects its own, if you know what I mean. But I think it's important to have these things in writing and to make the case, and I'm going to do that shortly.
Well, great. Listen, got to take a quick break. We'll be going to our next telephone caller. We'll be right back.
Find out more about Francis and Friends on our website, francisandfriends.com. We're tackling issues affecting the modern church. If you have a suggestion for a future program, send it to onair@jsm.org.
All right, we're back, and ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to go quickly to Scott in Florida. And Scott, welcome to Sun Life Broadcasting. You have a question for Roger Stone, please?
Well, it's more of a comment, and it is truly an honor to be able to speak to Mr. Stone. I've read his book, Jeb and the Bush Crime Family, watched his book signing at Barnes & Noble's, listened to him on InfoWars. I watched Get Me Roger Stone on Netflix, and I felt like after all of that, I felt like I knew him personally, and I told my wife, I said, the only thing he's missing is Jesus. And so my wife and I started praying earnestly for him. I never dreamt that it would have to come to that in order for him to, sometimes you're baptized by fire, and he was treated so unfairly, but we continue to intercede that the Lord would see him through and that he would confess Jesus as Lord and Savior, and that he did. The Lord was faithful to my wife and I for our prayers, and Mr. Stone, we continue to pray for you and your family. And the only thing that I would say that you're guilty of is you're guilty of being a loyal friend. And if I was accused of a crime of being a loyal friend, I hope there's enough evidence there to convict me of that. So God bless you for what you've done, for what you're doing. You're a patriot. I honor you. I honor the work that you've done, and we just champion you as a person, as a believer, and as a great advocate to my opinion, the best.
Okay, and thank you for calling. Did you have a response to that, Roger?
Yes, I do. First of all, I thank you very much for your kind words. Let me tell you the single hardest thing I find about being a Christian. I'm Sicilian. I come from the political wars. My natural instinct is to want revenge from the people who tried to destroy me and my family, whether it's James Comey or Robert Mueller or the epically corrupt prosecutors, in my case, Jeannie Rhee and Aaron Zelinsky. But the Bible tells us in Hebrews 10:30 through 31, that vengeance is essentially reserved for God, that
That's
God
right.
will punish those who have broken his laws. God will punish the evil. And therefore, I don't have to worry about revenge or just results, because I believe this is in the hands of God. And God hates lying. God hates deceit. God hates dishonesty. And those who have sinned against their country and their God will be punished. But it is up to him to decide that punishment, not Roger Stone. That's the
right.
hardest thing for me, is to put aside my strong feelings about those who did such horrible things to me and leave it to God. But that is what I am doing.
Yeah. Okay, Roger, let me share some emails that have come in quickly. It said, this guest is a breath of fresh air and a confidence builder in our president and what he has and is accomplishing in the United States of America. Then another one here, Roger. It said, "Thank you, Roger Stone. What an American love story. What a testimony for the United States of America. The breakdown of Mr. Stone's steps from the recognition that he needed help to the fruition of how the Lord faithfully pursues and woos us is more than able. Each miracle by God includes many others. Roger Stone's testimony includes many well-known figures from Trump to Graham to Russia and in between. Look at the folds. And praise God, may this generation forever be changed through politics, Christian TV, Sun Life Broadcasting, and the truth of the gospel." Thank you, Mr. Stone, for your program. It's very informative for me and the rest of the audience. I have a question that I hope you can answer. If President Trump loses the election, what does he think will become of the evangelical Christian movement in America? It appears the evangelical Christians will be an outcast group, as the conventional Republican Party doesn't seem to want to have anything to do with us. And the Democratic Party is unethical to our beliefs. Should the evangelical Christians start a third-party movement, or would Mr. Stone suggest that we stay in the Republican Party?
Well, here's the good news. The Republican Party needs evangelical Christians more than evangelical Christians need the Republican Party.
Amen. I
agree. I believe, as Barry Goldwater said, that the Republican Party is the traditional home of conservatives, and that's what we are. And therefore, I refuse to concede that the evangelical Christian movement would be weaker if Trump is defeated, and I pray that that does not happen. I would argue we will be stronger because the fight for America isn't over. It's just another chapter. And I think that should the president, unfortunately, be cheated out of the presidency, then we need to begin focusing on the midterm elections and the next election. I think there are good men and women who could lead this nation post-Trump. But the one that I am most interested in, the one person who I think could provide the same independent leadership would be General Michael Flynn. Now, I have no idea if he's interested in running for president. I don't know whether he'll be legally eligible to run for president, although I think he will be. But I would be looking for someone of faith, someone like General Flynn, to lead this movement. Donald Trump has said it 100 times. It's not about Donald Trump. It's about a movement. It's about a movement of people that he is the head of. But it is not about him personally, and he says this constantly.
Yeah. All right. Another email quickly, and I'm going to our next caller. Why hasn't Nancy Pelosi had charges brought against her for threatening President Trump? She said Trump is leaving the White House whether he wins the election or not.
Yeah, this is the same smear that they attempted to use on May 3 weeks ago when I gave an interview in which I said, if there's overwhelming evidence of election fraud, and if violent criminals are burning down every major city in America and starting to move into the suburbs, the president would have to look at either the 1807 Insurrection Act or actual martial law, because his first responsibility is to protect the safety of the American people, the safety and security of the American people. The crazy left-wing press immediately says, Roger Stone says if Trump loses, he should declare martial law. That's not what I said. Read the transcript, watch the interview. This is how the fake news works today. But we're heading into uncharted territory, Francis, because never in the history of our country has a major political party affiliated itself with a violent group of criminals to enforce their political will. Hitler did this with his SA, but that's a foreign ideology. We believe that we settle things peacefully in this country, in the courts if necessary, but not in the streets. It is not Trump supporters who are threatening to harass and intimidate voters at polling places. So I am very scared for our democracy because violence has no place in how we make these decisions. But the Democrats seem to be telling us we will either have our desired result or we will burn this country down.
Oh, my. All right, Mr. Stone, can you give me your thoughts about Black Lives Matter, the movement? And do you agree that systemic racism exists in America and the need for a Black Lives Matter type response is understandable?
First of all, I'm very proud of my own civil rights record. I opposed stop and frisk in New York City because I do believe that it was being applied racially. People were being stopped on the street and searched just because of their skin color. I'm sorry. I know a lot of conservatives disagree with me. I think that's wrong. I supported affirmative action under President Richard Nixon. I still believe in the program of giving preferences in contracting and hiring to African Americans. I get criticized for it. I have been against the racist war on drugs, a big, fat, expensive, socioeconomic failure. We are taking people who are not violent criminals and we're incarcerating them for long periods of time, costing the taxpayers millions, rehabilitating nobody. And these people are not violent criminals. They belong in drug treatment programs, not in prison. I was for Dr. King's birthday becoming a national holiday. So I get very tired when people call me a racist. When President Ronald Reagan declined to extend the Voting Rights Act in the South, I was working for him, and I wrote an op-ed disagreeing. So, yes, do we have race problems in America? Yes, we do. Have we come a long way to solving them? Yes, read the Constitution. Now, are we perfect? No, we're not perfect. But violence is not the answer. And Black Lives Matter is not some indigenous, honest protest uprising that's peaceful. These are paid agitators. These are just like Antifa. These are people who are professional provocateurs and thugs, and there is no place for violence in our political system.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, we agree.
What?
I was saying we agree with what he said.
Yeah. Now, Mike, you have another quick question.
Well, two, and I think you touched a little bit on it, and that is with the threat of violence, which, again, I think there are too many examples where Democratic leadership has threatened the President of the United States. And if it was anybody, any ordinary citizen threatening the life of the president, they would be immediately arrested. We don't see that happen. But the threat of violence if he loses, and we saw that on the inauguration, innocent businesses destroyed because they wanted to prove a point, spoiled kids. That's just the way I look at the way the Democrats are when they lose an election. Your opinion on what President Trump needs to do in that situation?
Well, I learned a long time in politics to try to avoid hypothetical questions because we're in a completely new area here. I believe, and this is just an educated guess, we're going to have a disputed result. The Democrats are going to claim on the basis of a lot of fraud that they won. We are going to claim that the president won because he probably did. And then appropriately, it would go to the courts. But the Democrats intend to pressure the courts and the populace and the people with extreme violence. At that point, the president has some extraordinary powers, but he's going to have to weigh very judiciously whether their use is legally appropriate or necessary. I pray that we don't have this wave of violence, but let's not be naive. These are fully financed, well-planned carefully orchestrated revolution. The truck full of bricks just pulls up at the right time, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
It is very clear if one wants to contribute to Black Lives Matter, for example, and you go to their website, it will take you to the credit card payment processor of the Democratic National Committee.
Okay.
Joe Biden is Black Lives Matter. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are Antifa. It's all one, folks.
Yes.
These are
Yeah.
not separate movements.
Yes.
100% right in what you're saying, Roger. And the people are sitting back watching it, and they know what's going on here in the United States.
All right, can I make one statement
yeah.
real quick? There is one statement that Nancy Pelosi made, and she has made it on several different occasions, and it bothers me, and I'm sure that others have picked up on it also. She makes the statement that the president will not be president in 2021. Now, she's not her statement is not wishful thinking. It's an indictment, and it concerns me to the degree of the violence that they display now because of what they're not happy with. It really concerns me that she makes that kind of statement.
Yes.
But again, she never recognized him as president from the beginning. She never did. And let me just say this right quick. Brother Stone and our president, and we've heard about our General Flynn and what they went through because they're Republicans and they stood for truth and for the Constitution of the United States and justice. And I personally believe that whenever we see what they have done to them because of their stand, what they believe and what they stand for, how can a person go to the polls and vote for a party that produces that? How can they do that? And then some of them, and many of them, will then say, I'm a Christian, I'm born again. And they will go to the polls and vote for a party that would do this to men that love this country and believe in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the things that it stands for. And then they have fought so hard, and I can't prove this, but I guarantee you we'll find it out one day. This coronavirus thing was built and released for the election in the United States of America on November the 3rd, more than anything else, and they have fought this whole thing so terribly. What are we looking at if he loses and the Democratic Party is set up? We all have to wonder if we won't be subject to the same treatment.
If you're not a person of prayer now, you will be then, for sure.
Yeah.
Yes, you will. Listen, this is serious.
And you know, Jim, some of what you said is opinion. You cannot prove that about the coronavirus. But it's your feeling, and I think there's hundreds of thousands of others today that have that same feeling. But Roger, do you want to make a comment on that?
Yes, I guess just very briefly. And it is to say this, that we have never had the threat of violence to back an election play. Hillary Clinton has said under no circumstances should Joe Biden ever concede, regardless of what the vote count is. They are brazenly telling us they intend to steal this election.
Absolutely.
They need to understand that they will be opposed in the courts. They will be opposed in an appropriate manner. We are praying that that does not devolve into violence. But they tried to remove the president on the basis of the phony Russian collusion hoax. Then they tried to remove the president on the basis of the phony Ukrainian hoax. And here's what you can safely say. They have tried to benefit from the outfall of the COVID-19 pandemic, regardless of where it came from.
Right.
They have tried to utilize it to hurt the president's prospects for re-election. And that is a fact. A very good friend of mine, Michael Caputo, someone who worked for President Reagan and Congressman Jack Kemp, recently joined the Trump administration as the spokesman for HHS, working specifically on the COVID-19 issue. He was diagnosed on Friday with throat and brain cancer, and his prospects do not look good. I ask your listeners today to please say a prayer for Michael Caputo and his family. He's a good man. He answered the call to public service. The president personally recruited him for this job. He's been there for a matter of months. He is now in God's hands. This is going to be a horrific battle. I ask that people pray for him and his family.
Yes, and Roger will be doing just that. The listeners to this program, please take that to heart. I'm so sorry to hear that. Let me read you something. It said, "We are watching Roger Stone, who we have followed for decades, and we would like to thank him for being on your program." And this is from Joseph. I won't read the last name, but it's from Joseph, Roger. It said, "Because the organized criminal enterprise media carrying out the dictates of a corrupt government, and no matter the news networks, has put this man through hell on earth. And yes, he recognized that while still alive and accepting Jesus Christ, not many in his line of work can thank God for that opportunity." Thank you, Roger. I hope you know this person that sent that email in. And then another quick email. "Thank you, Roger Stone, for being on this program. I hope President Trump will be encouraged by the tens of thousands of people praying for him on Saturday. And let us all pray for the debate tonight. And Roger, I'm happy that you know Jesus Christ. He will direct your path. And God bless you all." And this person is from Seattle, Washington. And then another one, Roger. "Please ask Mr. Stone, if you speak with our president, tell him that we love him and pray for him daily, and he is God sent." You know, those are some really nice emails, Roger. Thank the Lord.
I'm a very practical individual, and I understood that since I had been a hardcore political operative, hard-boiled political operative in this country for over 40 years, that when people learned that I had turned to Christ, when people learned that I had been reborn, that I would be mocked by the elites. And they didn't disappoint me. Washington Monthly, the Washington Post, the New York Times, they mocked me for my reaffirmation of faith. It's a joke, they said. It's a head fake. It's a ploy for public sympathy. It's dishonest. You know what? It doesn't bother me. Here's why. He knows what's in my heart. That's all that matters. He knows. I don't care what some liberal elitist beatnik on the Upper West Side of New York City thinks. I only care about what God thinks.
That's it.
And he knows what's in my heart.
That's it. Trent from Louisiana, welcome to Sun Life Broadcasting. You have a quick question for Roger Stone?
I sure do. Roger, it's so good to see you. Everybody's answered my question since I've been waiting to talk to you on the phone. So let me just go for broke. I've been listening now for the last several decades to the fact that the Christian movement around the world is the fastest growing social movement in the history of mankind. It's surpassing communism, they say, especially the Pentecostal growth. Is it possible that we could be seeing a interconnected, interlocking world between Latin America, Africa? China's having the greatest Christian revival in the history of mankind. Russia is sick of its communism. It's trying to come back to Christ. Do you see the possibility of a shining global moment where Christians take the bull by the horns and say, we are emphatically major players in world politics? Because we do have this standard of law and ethics and morality and values and principles from the Word of God. I just love to hear your point of view on that, Roger. Thank you.
I think we have that responsibility. Look, in my career, I spoke at the prestigious Oxford Political Union. I have spoken at topless gentlemen's clubs in Louisville, Kentucky, trying to raise money for my legal defense. I've spoken in pool halls, but until 3 weeks ago, I'd never spoken in a church. I spoke in the World Vision Bible Church outside of Nashville. It was one of the greatest experiences of my life. And now I'm going to speak at churches any opportunity I have, because I want to let people know my own experience. I want to say to them, I don't care whether your problem is alcoholism or drug abuse or relationship problems or family problems or health problems or financial problems. God will protect you. God will defend you. God will never abandon you if you turn your life over. I want to tell this story as many times as I can, and I have a backlog now of invitations to churches. I try to travel there at my own expense to just spread God's good word. If every Christian did this, yes, we would have a revolution in the world, and the world would turn to God.
Yes. Roger, let me say this. We're coming down to the end of this program, and how we appreciate you taking the time to be with us, and we pray that you'll come back and share your message concerning the Lord Jesus Christ. But let me say this. When you see the president, extend to him an invitation to be on this program.
Man, yes.
It reaches around the world. Tell him we'd love to let him speak to real America.
Amen.
And address their concerns and let the people ask him questions. This program is touching the hearts and lives of America, and they'd love to hear from the President of the United States.
Yes.
Roger?
Francis, I've got the message, and I will pass it on.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for being with us, and we're looking forward to having Roger Stone back on the program. There's a lot of things that the panel wanted to ask him, and I apologize that we didn't get to everything. But thank you for being tuned in to us today, and with us, I should say. We love you, and God bless you.
Email questions and comments about today's program to onair@jsm.org. Be sure to join Francis Swaggart on Facebook at facebook.com/Francis Swaggart. Archived programs are available at sunlifetv.com. Francis and Friends is a production of the Sun Life Broadcasting Network.